Hello everyone, it's Silvia. Welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to have a look at a few decks that really blew my mind. Let's do this. So it just occurred to me probably a couple of months ago that after I do an unboxing, which is what it is, just an unboxing. So I'm opening the box where there's a deck. I share my first impressions with you guys, and then I just set it aside. It doesn't necessarily mean that I don't keep on working with the deck. As a matter of fact, most of the time, I want to get to know the deck, especially if my first impressions were, let's say, if I had to give it a, let's say, a rating between 0 or 1 to 5, I avoid the threes. I hope it makes sense. So I always want to work with a deck that actually surprises me. But ironically, I also want to work with a deck that surprises me in a bad way. So if I give it a rating of 4 or 5, I obviously love and want to work with it because it's a deck that really found its place in my heart. But I want to work with the deck also if it's a 1 or a 2, because I want to prove myself wrong and I just really want to get to know the deck before I decide whether it really doesn't work with me and I just want to reharm it. So I will have a bunch of decks that I really love on one side of my desk, and then on the other side I will have a bunch of decks that I really did not like. And some of them, the one on the left, will actually end up on the right side of the deck after I work with them. And if I don't talk about these decks in the months afterwards, I just realized that maybe during the impressions I wasn't really enthusiastic, and I may have given out maybe a wrong impression of what I think and feel about that deck that got corrected when I actually started working with the decks. Anyway, this is a very convoluted way to say that sometimes I change my mind when I work with a deck after my first impressions. And that is absolutely fine. We are entitled to do that because I never really stop at appearances. I always need to get to know something before I honestly take a decision. So these decks are decks that I've actually worked with, but some of them are decks that I had a not so positive first impression on, and some of these decks are decks that I had a very good first impression. So the first deck that I'm going to show you was probably one of those that received a rating of 1 or 2, and it's the new Immortals Tarot. Let me just zoom in. So there is a whole story behind this deck, to the point that when I actually received it, I thought that it was also haunted because there had been some really weird things happening with the purchasing and the shipping of this deck. I received it also in a month of Halloween, so all of the decks that I was buying for myself in Spooktober, generally speaking, I tended to buy all of the decks that I ended up using for Halloween and for Samhain. So I was already in that kind of frame of mind. And when I received it, I thought, okay, well, it's the deck. This deck is haunted. It's haunted. I don't know what to do with it. I thought I loved it. I did not know that the minors were this peepish. It doesn't even make sense. It's that there's too many different cultures mixed up. And then I wanted to give this deck a chance to just prove itself and see whether and it's generally me. It ends up being me. I really don't mean to say anything against any kind of decks whatsoever. If the deck and I do not resonate, it's mostly because of me, because I probably have different kind of expectations that are not met by the deck, but that is absolutely nothing against the deck. In any case, I really wanted to see whether I could get on board with this deck. So once that we put it this way, let's just have a look. And so I started working with it. I started looking up some of the references. I started, it doesn't come with the massive guidebook, but then again, it is an indie deck. And I believe this is also numbered, by the way. So it's a limited edition, I am expecting. But it does come with, let's say, a legend of the new Immortals, an inspiration getting started. And there's also a spread, if I remember. Yes, a 3-card spread. So this is not something that I actually used or that actually helped me in bonding with this deck. What I did was I actually looked out for a number of walkthroughs of this deck on YouTube or other social media platforms, and whenever I found one, I was really kind of paying attention and trying to see whether that was switching on a light bulb or not. And just to show you just quickly, it also comes with a couple of blank cards at the end, just in case you want to do some kind of a, I don't know, maybe a significator for you or something like that. And it does come with a couple more cards. I see here, I don't remember exactly how many, but it's all, I put everything at the end of the deck, so it would have been easier to find them. But we've got Cassiopeia, we've got Aphroditus, Pandion, Rotor, Ilio, Palemon, Calliope, and Antiope. So these ones are very interesting as well. And I have to be honest, I did Google all of these up. Some of them I probably kind of knew the meaning of the card, but I don't necessarily use them. I think it's because I haven't really memorized some set of keywords that I can apply to each and every one of these. But they are very beautiful anyway, and obviously I keep them in the deck. And so just to show you the deck, so the new Immortals, it's the concept is that every now and then we do get a generation of people that are heroic, and then we need to refer to them as the spiritual guides of our times, and these become the new Immortals because they go on even after they pass on. Their teachings resonate with a new generation and then the generation after that, and so on and so forth. And so this is a very interesting concept. And when I look at the majors, I was in love because I really like it when the artwork goes beyond the frame, like in many, many cases. In these cards, in here, you can see it here and here for the star card, which is really beautiful, by the way. But you can also see it here for the moon card, or you can see it here for the sun card, and so on and so forth. And even the judgment card, look at this one. It looks almost as if the angel, where it's not, because we then understand that it's actually holding this terrible. But at the beginning, I actually thought that it was holding one of the borders as some kind of a place where you lean on and you hold on to something in order to gather balance. But it's not, it's really tricky. I really thought it did. And I thought, oh, this is amazing because not only is it going beyond the border, but it's actually using those borders and integrating them into the message. Then I just realized that it wasn't. It would have been a really cool idea, I think. And the world card, etc. Then when I started looking, I remember this first impression. When I started looking at the court cards, I was like, oh yeah, I really like them. Yeah, these are really cool. And then I started looking at the minors. The aces are absolutely fine because, of course, the aces are kind of pippish. And then I was like, oh no, this is the 2 of Wands. Okay, well, it is pippish. Maybe it's just this one. And then when I saw the 3 of Wands and so on, because it's not 100% of the minors that are pippish, then I thought, oh, okay, it was just the 2 of Wands, because the 3 of Wands, I can actually see it. There's a couple of bags. I can see that happening. It's expanding your horizon, a sense of growth, definitely the sense of growth, numerologically speaking. And then I was like, okay, this is the 4 of Wands, the celebration of life, perhaps, the different stages, but these look like different moths or butterfly, but moth. I don't know whether it's the same family. We do distinguish them in Italian, but they are, I believe, they are Lepidoptera, which is the Latin name for butterfly, for the family of butterflies. So I have already started doubting myself when I got to this card because I didn't really understand what was happening here, and then I was going on and looking at the 5 and the 6, and the 6 I was like, oh no, hang on, I can see it. This is the crown. And then the 7, I was like, I don't really understand the 7. These are snails going up. So I was a little bit, let's say, it was a bit of a hit and miss when I first started doing the first impression, but also when I started looking at this deck and trying to work with the deck. But then I just realized that all this deck needed was a perfect pair. So I just needed to find the perfect oracle deck that would pair so nicely with this deck that on the one hand, it will make me want to use this deck because I really love the pair and I just wanted to get more of those epiphanies, that you get sometimes with the tarot and oracle vibe so much with each other. And B, it also made me understand this deck a little bit better because sometimes when I was looking for the meaning of the cards, I was also shifting my focus from the oracle deck onto the tarot deck, and that gave me the opportunity to relate those two cards together, and perhaps that was giving me an insight on the tarot. And so I actually really, really liked it. And let me just show you the oracle deck that did this for me and gave me the possibility to go from a 1 or 2 stars to a 4 or 5 star for the new Immortals Tarot. Okay, so this is the oracle deck, and I just wanted to show you the backs first of all, because I believe that the backs also show you or give you already a bit of a preview of how well these two work together, simply because they resonate so much. It looks like the characters depicted on the backs of these cards are very similar to the characters that we can feel coming out of the cards here in the tarot deck. And this is called, I believe it's either the New Mantra Tarot Oracle, the New Mantra Oracle, or the Mantra Oracle. I unfortunately do not have the box of this deck any longer. And I need to find the guidebook because I'm sure 100% that I kept the guidebook, but I actually don't have the box anymore. And so I don't necessarily remember the title of this deck, but I will make sure to look for it, and then at the time of editing I will make sure to put it here in the title. So this deck is obviously based on mantras, and you can see that immediately because there are sentences we use on mantras at the bottom of the card. So Kirtan Kriya really is in my mind. I'm not an expert. Let's say I do a lot of meditation, but I only know probably 3 or 4 mantras. And I have to say that memorizing them has not been the easiest task I've ever done. And so, because obviously they're in Sanskrit, or at least the ones that I memorized that I really like. And I'm talking about the Gayatri mantra, for example, the mantra dedicated to Tara, and the sun salutation mantra. So those ones, obviously, the sun salutation is on Mani Padme On. Love is all around us is very easy. But if you look at the Gayatri mantra, it's actually rather long. And it's very beautiful. I absolutely love it. It is a mantra that I actually use for release. And it's, wow, look at this. And so it's very nice. And I don't know any other mantras. When I do see these cards, Pavan, I kind of reminds myself of the times in which I was doing yoga, not by myself, but I was going to a yoga studio. And so I was going to different classes, and there was one of the yogi that was really good with mantras, and she had a fantastic voice, and she was actually chanting. And so the words may resonate with me, but I don't necessarily remember what they mean. Obviously, it does say so on so hong means I am infinity. And when I use these two together, I just let my mind go into the trance-like state that is very similar to what I experience when I chant a mantra for such a long time. Especially when it comes to the Gayatri mantra, I kind of get into this sense of trance because I just detach myself from the really heavy thoughts that bring me back to earth. And that is most of the time, that is what you want to achieve when you're chanting mantra. There's a number of reasons why you would. Of course, it's a symbol for prayer as well. But in my case, I dedicate at least an hour when I feel really overwhelmed by negative thinking. I try and take a step back from everything that anchors me down. And one of the things that really helps me do so is chanting a mantra, because it's almost as if it were switching off my thinking, which is more often than not quite hurting me. And so this is a fantastic deck when you want to try something like that. But when you pair this up together, there is something that goes on. There's a lot of colors that are very similar. So there you go, the Gayatri Mantra, may the sun guide my way. And let me tell you, if you're not familiar with the Gayatri Mantra, just Google it and perhaps listen to one or another rendition. It doesn't really matter. But it is incredibly powerful. And so I really love it because I find that in many cases, there's this kind of echoes between the cards. Perhaps they show the same symbols. Perhaps they have very similar colors. Perhaps the words themselves remind me of something that I find in the tarot cards. And it just works really well. So for example, here the Antarna mantra, which is the lucky no matter what. And this one, let me tell you, and be very naive in telling you this. At the beginning, I thought that this was one of the affirmations that you recite to yourself to attract abundance, because there's many of those as well. Actually, this mantra is the opposite. It's saying that no matter how little we have, we're still lucky because we have, and then it shows you we have the cosmos, we have this connection to the world, we have this connection to each other. And that's why I really like this deck, because it gave me the opportunity to focus more on the meanings of the cards, but also have them resonate with me through the sense and the scope of the images. And so the Three of Swords in this case really resonates, because lucky no matter what, when my mind is in a Three of Swords situation in which I'm taken by the anguish, by the anxiety of the overwhelm, of the overthinking, then at that point I need to remind myself of how lucky I am. Not because I want to be naive. Please understand, you can fool yourself into being extremely positive, and that would be toxic. So we need to find the right way to approach positive thinking, not just imposing on top of us and just ignoring the feelings that we have, that sometimes are feelings of something negative. So acknowledge this, acknowledge that I find myself in a difficult situation, but just remind myself that no matter what is happening right now, I do feel like I have this really strong bond with the community, with, for example, my husband, my family, my closest friends. And so reminding myself of how lucky I am just because I have these people in this life. And that really works. So the overwhelm may not be ignored, it's still acknowledged, but at the same time, I feel better because I also know that there is something else. So there is, it really works. Let me tell you, it really works. We are we and we are one. Return to the unity. And I don't know. I know that when I talked about the new Immortals the first time, I received a lot of comments from people saying that they agree with me, that this deck doesn't work for them and they don't really understand it and everything. It's not that I understand it more, but my feelings towards this deck changed completely thanks to this oracle, because now I actually found a way to use it. I feel like I want to use it even more often now, because it's almost as if I were adding up the appeal of the mantra oracle together with the new immortals. And I also like the fact that it works so well together. And it gives me the possibility to know or learn about the deck a little bit more, which is always a joy for me. So Sat Siri Siri Akal, accepting my multidimensionality with the Justice card. How beautiful is that? Understanding that there's always different aspects to the story. When we look at the fact, there's so many different takes on that fact, the multidimensionality of that fact, but justice is blind. And so at the same time, there is one core truth that is unshakable. Really, really beautiful. Also, an excellent combo if you want to do some kind of meditation, rituals of any kind, and also, let's say, some um, journal prompting or writing down your thoughts at the end of a day. You just pull 3 cards, one at the center like I'm doing now, and 2 from the tarot deck on the side. I release control, breaking free from control. That is the essence of the Tower card in many, many situations. And the 7 of Pentacles, that tells you that you're reassessing your road. And it's very beautiful because this 7 of Pentacles always looks like someone reassessing which way to go for me. And, standing at the crossroad and just understanding whether you want to go one way or another. But you need to do that after having released that kind of control that was kind of keeping you in prison. So you see what I mean? It builds up on the words and it builds up on understanding the meaning of the cards. And I really, really love it. And so it's a wow for me, even though the wow for the New Immortals is definitely thanks to the combination of the two used together. But this is definitely a wow factor for me. And I'm very grateful that I found my way around the New Immortals, because when I saw it, I really wanted it and I had to wait a while. And as I said, there were a lot of setbacks in acquiring this deck. But I feel like now I know my way around it. So I'm quite pleased with that. And just to go on the other side of the spectrum, so I just showed you a deck that now it's a wow deck for me, but my original impressions on that deck were of ratings of either 1 or 2 stars out of 5. So not the best, shall we say. This is an example of a deck that immediately had me convinced, and I loved it as soon as I saw it. It was love at first sight. And I actually, when something like that happens, I want to second guess myself because I want to make sure that it's actually a fantastic deck. And so I work with it from a different perspective. So when it comes to the New Immortals, I had no expectations because my first impressions were not the most positive. And so I, not having any expectations, actually waited or worked in a really positive way towards the deck because I was surprised in an easier way. When I start with a 4 or a 5 out of 5 kind of rating, then my expectations are really high. And I hope this is making sense. And then when I work with that deck, I'm kind of very stern, and I don't let myself be swayed by how much I love the artwork, etc. I really need to see if that deck is indeed holding up to my initial impressions. So I'm talking about the grief deck, rituals, meditations, and tools for moving through loss. This is a mass market deck. I found it on Amazon. It is created by Princeton Architectural Press. So the Princeton Architectural, it's not necessarily a publisher that we always associate with decks, tarot, and oracle that they might be. However, I would say this is one of those I wouldn't want to call it a self-help deck because this is not exactly what it is. This is a let's say a tool that helps you by embracing you in your adventure through grief and loss, and it takes you to a place where you can work on your grief by suggesting, for example, rituals, as you say here, suggesting rituals, meditations, and giving you tools for moving forward. And it is incredibly powerful, very, very powerful. But I also wanted to show you that it's also really beautiful, aesthetically speaking. It is a very calming looking deck. All of the cards have something related to the card itself. So all of your rituals, all of your meditation prompts and everything is at the back of the card itself. You don't find them on the book. And as a matter of fact, in here, it's just a list of all of the major contributions by the people that that did something for the deck, whether it was related to creating a ritual, or they were artists, or they are psychologists. There's a couple of psychologists here, or at least therapists here as well. There's a couple of Eastern philosophers, let's say. There's also a First Americans, and I find that really, really interesting. So we do get to see a mix of cultural approaches towards grief, because there's no two ways around that. Grief is universal. You don't encounter any kind of culture on this planet that doesn't have their own particular way to deal with grief. And if you are going through grief, I highly recommend this deck because it's really well done. It's very affordable. I believe I paid something around 33 Australian dollars, which is about, let me think, 25, probably 24 US dollars. So it's very affordable. It's a mass market deck. I found it on Amazon, Amazon Australia. So you may found it on the Amazon of serving your country. And so at first look, I fell in love with the artwork that you can find in these cards, even though it's not very consistent. As you can see here, this is a photo of a dandelion, overexposed. I believe there is some kind of manipulation here. And in this case, you have a chart. So you go, okay, well, chart does not necessarily speak about art to me, or something that I would define as beautiful. I actually love charts, not this one, but I used to work with numbers, and numbers, direct. You never work with numbers without producing a chart, because numbers by themselves, whenever I was doing some reporting jobs, I just thought that people forget numbers. They need something visual to anchor down the concept. And so I was always coming out with charts, and that was, doing the job. So this one is indeed very helpful because it tells you how to go through the peak moments of grief where it is so overwhelming that you actually feel restlessness. Perhaps your blood pressure is going up, perhaps your heartbeats are going up, and obviously that creates a number of problems in your body from a physiological point of view, but also from a psychological point of view. So if you look at this chart, it tells you how to inhale in small bouts of inhaling. So inhale, hold, inhale, hold, and then exhale all of it, all of the air, oxygen that you have inside of your lungs, and then hold and start again. So this is very easy to repeat. I mean, if I had to read the description of this, I would not have had the same swiftness in understanding what I need to do. So this is not particularly artistic, but this is, for example. So there's a number of cards, and each and every one of them does come with something written behind on the back. And whenever it's a photo or a painting, or it might be a photo that's been manipulated, it might be some graphic design, there's always something that you can look at the back of the card. You also see, for example, who contributed to each and every card at the back, at the bottom. So this one has the prompt by National Hospice Cooperative, NHC, and the artwork is by Janice Fried, or Fried, sorry, I don't know how to pronounce that. It's spelled this way. So it's probably Fried, but it could be German. And so it would be pronounced in a different way. In any case, so you see the card, this is the artwork. It may communicate something to you, it may resonate or not. But at the end of the day, when you turn around, you just look at what it says. Yeah, exercising your grief. So exercise is an important component to staying healthy and is a natural mood elevator. What are your favorite physical activities? How could you incorporate more movement into your daily life? Can you find a natural setting in which to be physically active? Take a walk, ride a bike, jog, stretch. Even the briefest periods of movement are valuable. Let me tell you, I am going through grief right now, and grief can come in a number of different forms. So in my case, it's because of the loss of a fur baby. And I am going through grief, and obviously I do feel it coming to me. I was talking to one of my members the other day, and I completely resonated when she said, you know, grief comes in waves, and they are powerful and they crush you, and then they really slowly recede. And that is my experience as well. But no two experiences are alike. And when it comes to what I want to do with what I have at my disposal, so my resources, is I want to dedicate a lot more attention to my physical body, because I have been neglecting myself for 2 months, sleeping 3 hours a night, and there's a number of things that I would say were really tough. And so now I can feel the consequences. I have high blood pressure, for example, and so on and so forth. And so I'm actually exercising a lot more, but it's not just the way, the number of kilometers that I walk or what I do for cardio, etc. It's also the intention behind them. By understanding that I am doing this for myself to help myself process that grief, I have that particular intention that actually takes me forward. So it is very, very interesting. And I have to say, I have not looked or read all of these cards, but there's some of them that are really very powerful and very, very beautiful. So this one, for example, I talked about this when I talked about the decks that I use for the Rainbow Bridge, when I said that I'm going back to my Italian origins, where in Italy we don't shy away from expressing our pain. As a matter of fact, our pain needs to be communicated to the community, because you want everyone to know how much you're suffering. And this card is very strong when it comes to that. Let others know what you need. It is a good idea to clearly communicate with caring friends and family what will be most helpful to you in your grief journey. They may need to be educated on common expressions of grief to provide optimal support. Take a moment to ask yourself, what would be helpful to hear right now? What does support look like right now? Who might be able to offer that support? Call, text, or email someone to ask for something you need. This is incredibly important if you're going through grief. Don't forget, don't think that you can go through that grief, those feelings on your own, because you probably can, but you don't have to. So it's not saying, oh, you're not strong enough. No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying, why would you? You are not alone. You have a community around you that loves you, that supports you, and they're eager to do something to make you feel better, but they might not know how to. So just let them know. It's a really beautiful card. Very good point. So there's a number of things that this deck is really teaching me. And if you ask me whether I kept my ratings of a 5 out of 5 stars after I started reading with this deck, using this deck, doing a number of rituals, I would say no, it's actually increased. if that would ever be possible, which it's not, obviously. 5 stars is, you cannot give more than 5 stars out of 5, obviously. But this is an incredibly powerful deck, very beautiful. All of the rituals that I've done, which, as I said, it's not all of there are, but all of the ones that I have done are incredibly powerful. They're very, very beautiful. They're also really, really kind, which is something that obviously we need while going through grief. Look at this daisy, for example. I was drawn to this daisy when I saw it. So this is one way you can actually use the deck. You go through the card face up, you look at them, and you stop whenever you feel that one of them is particularly calling to you. And then you turn it around and then you read what it says. And this card says acceptance, let it rain. And let me tell you, this card made me extremely emotional when I saw it. First of all, because I had no idea. So when I turned it, I thought that it was going to be something like this long, that it was going to be something very articulated, something that I would have to reflect on, something that was proposing me a ritual. I don't know, something like that, because many of these cards do. And so when I was like, oh, this is a really beautiful card. Look at that. I like it. What is this card telling me? And it says, let it rain. And I just started crying. And that was very helpful. It was really necessary for me, because crying is your nervous system just resetting itself by letting go of a lot of tension. You, by crying, by expressing that grief through not just, literally tears, but also sobs and all of the things that go with crying, you actually allow your nervous system to reset itself. And more often than not, after you finish crying, you will feel slightly better, if not psychologically, at least physiologically. So I was really, well, that destroyed me right there. That destroyed me, of course. And there was another card, but I think I actually passed it. But this is so very beautiful. Remembrance enhances endearment. Recall the people you love who you have lost in your life, and who have added deeply to who you are. This is what I always say. Let's remember them and honor them by reminding ourselves of the trait in our personality that have changed thanks to the fact that they were in our lives. And so then write a blessing equation, for example, John and Shannon and Leslie and Chandra, me. How beautiful is this? We are the sum of all of the people that we meet in our lives. Take some time with each name, recalling the special qualities of that person and how they taught you those qualities by how they lived. Finishing by thinking of yourself, the product of the equation, and how you contribute to the lives of others. This is fantastic right here. You can do a lot of work with this. And let me tell you, this will stay with me forever. This is not something that I'm going to forget easily, because it's something that has so great an impact on myself. So I still love this deck. There's a few, I wouldn't say triggering, but there's a few confronting cards. This one was incredibly confronting and triggering when I saw it, because of all the stitches here and the fact that you see inside the mouth of this person, and the fact that, there's a stitch. I don't know if you can tell, but this is like a surgical thread. And so this person is almost as if they were sewing themselves up. Dealing with past wrongs and resentments, anger, resentment, or unforgiveness are heavy burdens to carry, and if not dealt with, can sabotage your grief journey. Writing a letter to the one who has wronged you can be incredibly healing. Take your time composing the letter, and so on and so forth. I actually haven't done that yet, but I want to. So I highly recommend this deck. It's really incredible. There's a number of rituals, as I said, but also a number of, let's say, affirmation, consideration, or anything you want to think of that can help you going through this process, which is very human, but also very, very hard to go through. So this deck is a wow deck, absolutely a wow deck. No, I do not use it for divination. It's not one of those oracle decks that I will eventually pair up with a tarot deck, because I don't think that it's going to work that way. And as a matter of fact, it wouldn't even work if you pulled more than one card at a time. But when you do pull one card and you meditate on that, let me tell you, it does help. It really does. So another deck that started with me being a little bit perplexed about it was the Voodoo Tarot Spirit Box by Fabio Strani. This is a deck by Lo Scarabeo, and it comes in this really beautiful deluxe kind of wraparound magnetic closure kind of box. It has really beautiful insides, as you can see here. Very, very nice artwork that is also repeated in the guidebook, so it's very, very beautiful. The guidebook is chunky, as you can see, so it is something that helps, let's say. And my first impressions of this deck, in spite of the fact that the product itself presents itself as really valuable, very nice, there were a number of things that just didn't sit well with me. First of all, because I received a number of comments from you guys saying that this deck is very expensive in your country. It would have been very expensive to purchase it from Amazon Australia as well. I think it sells, or at the time I bought it, it was selling for $90 Australia, which is a lot of money. It's about 58 USD. So obviously we're looking at the higher end of the mass market products. And that didn't sit well with me because we talked about this. We had the discussion before. Why mass market then? It's not mass market. It cannot be mass distributed because it's a really expensive deck. So what is the intent behind the publisher? Truth be told, Lo Scarabeo sells it for, I believe it's 33 euros in Italy. I purchased it directly from Lo Scarabeo and ended up paying only 25 euros because I had a voucher or a discount code or something like that. And obviously I had to pay shipping on top, but that would have been the case for any other deck. If this costs a lot of money in your country as well, I recommend looking into the possibility to see whether Lo Scarabeo ships to your country as well. And if they ship to Australia, let me tell you, they probably ship to the rest of the world as well. So that is one possibility. Just keep in mind that it is only worth it when you buy 2 or 3 decks because the shipping costs are really high, but they ship this one with DHL. I got this deck 5 days, not 5 working days, 5 actual days, calendar days after I ordered it online. So yes, you pay, I think it was about $50 to ship it from Italy, but then again, honestly, I would have paid for a normal shipping, I would have probably paid $35. It's only $15 on top, Australia, which is about $9 US, and I received it in 5 days. If you don't need it that quickly, perhaps you can find a reseller. But what I wanted to say is that my first impressions, because of a number of things, were not the best. So I probably gave a rating of 2 stars out of 5. But I really did not want to let it go because Fabio Strani is the author of some of my favorite decks. So if you think of the Santa Muerte, for example, it is one of my favorite decks. It is so beautiful. The illustrations are fantastic. And the concept itself is really interesting. And obviously, it is one of the decks that I use for that particular time of the year that I call Spooktober. And so there were, I really wanted to be invested in this deck. I didn't want to just listen to my gut feelings of the first impression and thinking that it wasn't a deck that I would have loved. I found that very difficult also to be, let's say, happy about the cardstock because it feels very flimsy. It is very papery, which is generally speaking something that I like, but in this case I also wanted a bit more sturdiness to the cards, which I did not have. And because of this really strong papery kind of feeling to the touch on the front of the cards, it feels almost as if they're easy to damage, which is actually not true. So I have actually used this deck. I put it back in order, I think, yes. I've used this deck a lot, but as I did before with the new Immortals Tarot, I had to find the right Oracle deck to pair it with, and I knew that it needed to be an Oracle deck that I already really liked and I already knew for that to be leading, on this combo, this combination that I tried out. So let me just quickly show you the deck. So obviously it is based on Voodoo because it is around this type of religion. It is a very beautiful deck. When it comes to the aesthetic appeal, I had no doubts at all. I mean, I absolutely love Fabio's artwork. The way in which it can convey the sense of perspective, for example, in this card is nothing short of beautiful. The rendition of the various elements of the Voodoo religion are done really, really well. I know just a little about Voodoo. I have been to several places on on this beautiful earth, and I have been visiting, for example, Santeros. I have been to the Elegua. I've been to Cuba. I've been to New Orleans. There's a number of things that helped me achieve a slightly deeper knowledge to and gave me a different approach to relate to these cards. But even said that, even with that, I still felt like I wasn't reaching for this deck. I wasn't really feeling like I wanted to use it. There's a couple of cards that are a little bit confrontational. Couple of rights that are a little bit confrontational, as you can see here. I particularly, there's a number of things that for me are very painful to see. However, I do have the most profound respect for this religion. And so I am no one to say anything about what is happening in some of these cards. But my, let's say, my goal was to understand, as I said at the beginning of this video, whether I really could not see myself using this deck, because it wasn't resonate for me. Or if it was just a matter of going past those first impressions and push through them and perhaps achieve a different level and see whether I could combine it with the Oracle deck. And I did, and let me just show you. So I'm just going to quickly shuffle the deck, and then I'm going to show you which Oracle deck I'm going to pair it with. So the Oracle deck that I want to pair it with that I'm going to show you is the Southern Gothic Oracle. This is a deck that I really love. I love everything about this deck. It's very beautiful, it's very communicative, the images are incredible, I like the art style, I like what it says, I like the keywords associated with the images on the cards, I like everything about it. And this is the reason why I tried these two out together, because I thought I love the Southern Gothic so much that perhaps that will give me the possibility to suspend my, let's say, the way in which the first impressions on the Voodoo Tarot skewed my perception of the deck. So by relying on an oracle deck that I really love and understand and know how to use, etc., I can free up some of my mind in order to be able to best approach the tarot. And it just worked. It just really, really worked. It's also because even though we're not talking specifically about exactly the same type of culture, if you know anything about the Southern Gothic Tarot, you will understand that there's a couple of similarities that we can see. In particular, some types of divination, for example, with the cowrie shell, is actually shared by the traditions in the southern states of the US, and also Voodoo. So there's a number of things that they do put these two in the same, let's say, atmosphere, and that definitely helps, even though it's not the only thing. But I have to say, the best way to approach this deck, the tarot deck, is to let yourself understand that it doesn't necessarily need to be read like the RWS. So if you look at the cards, you always have, at the beginning at least, you always have to go back to the guidebook in order to understand, because obviously it doesn't come automatically. For some cards, for example, it would be. So this is the Three of Swords, for example, which is clearly the overwhelm in the mind because of the image that we can see here. But at the same time, perhaps the Ten of Cups. The Ten of Cups is actually the way in which you can communicate with the beyond with the help of everyone. So you can see all of the hands, holding on to this bowl of water, and the conjuring happens thanks to the fact that every single person is tuned in this practice. So there's a number of things that obviously they may suggest an RWS type of reading for this deck, but if you do go to the guidebook, you will see that is not always exactly like that. For some cards, it might be the Four of Swords as well, for example, but for others, it may not. This makes it a really interesting deck. Obviously, it's also a deck that would take a fair amount of time in order to be able to work with, because it's not something that you can do right out of the box. You don't necessarily use this deck immediately the day you receive it. You do have to do some research, or at least you have to read the guidebook and try and understand what the associations are, what the names are, because there's obviously the renaming in the court cards. There's a number of things. But when it comes to this combination with the Southern Gothic Oracle, I feel like, first of all, because the art style is so very similar, it feels like these two decks belong to the same kind of environment. They are released in the same kind of way. And I also really like the fact that there's similarities when it comes to the borders as well. Yes, they're not the same color. These are whites. These are, I don't know, a rusted kind of paper, an old newspaper kind of color. So it's not the same color, but it is the same kind of shape. And so you can still feel the harmony when it comes to the real estate or the images on the card. And then when you start looking at the symbols, you will feel that there is a connection here, and you can actually read these together. So we got the black coffee with the shadow work and the awakening, which is really strong. And obviously the black coffee by itself does represent a kind of a jolt in your system, because it really puts all of your wheels into motion. It gives you a lot of adrenaline, that charge you need, etc. Right? So when you compare it to the keyword shadow work, you also understand that it needs to have a lot of intention. So you are awakening yourself thanks to the power of a black coffee, for example. But it's also referring to the light of the sun that is actually all encompassing and showing you everything that is around you, with also some kind of a harshness sometimes. So we tend to read the sun as the brief moment of joy, of the little things, of the everyday life, but at the same time, we also understand that the sun itself is very powerful. And the shadow work, at least the way I see it, is when you go deeper within yourself, in the parts of your own self, knowledge of yourself that are hidden because they're in the shadow, you take them away from the shadow, you take them onto the light of the sun. That lets you do some sort of an assessment on these things, and then you decide whether you want to release them when they no longer serve you, or you want to cherish them by building up on them. So there's the Ace of Coins, obviously, because the Ace of Coins is the project, is something that you start building on with the resources that you already have, but you may have been neglecting so far. So this is just one example of the way in which I read these two together. And let me tell you, after a couple of times, it just really starts clicking, and it works really well. They're really beautiful as well. I still do not necessarily use the Voodoo Tarot as a divination for, let's say, a 3-card pool. I still have to find its own niche in my practice, and but I'm confident that I will find that soon, because using it with this oracle deck actually gives me that possibility. And that's my intention when I use these two together. So we've got the crossroads with road opener and decisions, which is something very, very resonating for me. I am very aware whenever I find myself, at the crossroads. And so we've got the Judgment card with Baron Samedi and the Strength card with Bossuashade. And this is very interesting because it feels almost as if, this was a confirmation. The judgment card is a confirmation of the crossroads, because it tells me that I can no longer postpone taking a decision. I need to be aware of my choices, of my resources, of what I have in front of me, of what taking one road rather than another would mean for me. But at the same time, it's wishing me well, wishing me to use all of the strength that I've got, even though it may signify battle ahead, for example, because of the strength card. So this is, as I said, it just works. It started working for me, and I am very, very happy that I didn't end up taking the decision of rehoming this deck, because artistically speaking, aesthetically speaking, it is a very beautiful deck to me. I really, really love it. So definitely a wow deck now that I have learned how to approach it thanks to the Southern Gothic Oracle. And last but not least, I wanted to show you again this deck, because oh my goodness, this deck. This is the Mentis Tarot by the collective art by Olina US. And this is, the name of the company is, I believe, Mindful Ape. So there's more than one deck realized by Olina. That's the only one that I've got. I believe the other one is still photography based, but it's a full color. But I really wanted this deck because it's a black and white photographic deck. And it's just absolutely mind-blowing. This is seriously one of the decks that it's just a 1 out of 100 decks that I buy. Sometimes you do have one of these ones, and it was due. It was due, but it's just this is not, as I said, it's not just a 5 out of 5 stars. This is a 10 out of 10, in the sense that, it's even more difficult, obviously, to reach the maximum void rating. But even if I went to 100, I would still give it 100 stars out of 100. It is incredibly beautiful. The photography is fantastic. It is not, so there's a number of things that I consider as pet peeves of mine when I look at photography, because being a photographer myself, there's a number of things that I really do not like, and one of them is, for example, oversaturation. This would not be the case because it's obviously a black and white deck, but sometimes also tweaking too much the exposure. For example, I never touch the exposure slide. To me, I need to take the exposure. I need to get it right in camera. If I didn't get the right exposure, generally speaking, what I do when I take a photo with my professional cameras, I would take 3, 4, 5 photos of the same subject, because I would take them with different levels of exposure. And so I would find the right one. But that is the important thing for me. When I get to the point in which I'm working on the photo from my computer, I would never touch the exposure slide. What I would do is I would do some correction on the white balance, for example, because that is not always perfect, especially when you take raw format photos. But this one is just perfect. It's something that, for example, there's a lot of people that use the vibrance slide, the saturation, as I said before, but also there is one which is not, I don't remember. It does have different names depending on the software you're using, but what it does, it actually works on the definition. So you probably know it as the definition slide on your software for digitally manipulating the photos. I don't necessarily think that we should get to that point, because photos should speak for themselves. When you get it right on camera, there's only a couple of things that you may have to tweak. If it's a raw file, for example, definitely use the focus, because it's not, it's not auto-focused on camera. And also, obviously, you will have to look at the format you want to save it. So the definition you want to save the file into, because the raw files are really, really big. And in any case, as soon as you start working with them, you cannot save and manipulate a raw file as a raw file again. So you will have to go for JPEG. But in this case, you have to choose the definition, the size of the file. So there's a number of things that I don't want to go too much into details. But I would say I do have really high expectations when it comes to a photographic deck. And truth be told, I only really love just 2 photographic decks, and up until a couple of months ago, it was just the one. It was the Somnia Tarot. I absolutely love Nicholas Bruno. I think he's an absolutely fantastic photographer, and it shows in his deck. So the Somnia Tarot, but this one, obviously it's not the Somnia, even though some other cards that do remind me of the Somnia. But this is absolutely fantastic. I mean, I really love what the artist has done in this deck. But when I started, using it for the first time, I was telling myself, perhaps your judgment of the deck is too askew because you love photography and you know about photography, you know what to look for in a photo in order to understand whether you like it or not. But let's actually see whether it is also a really good deck, because it is a tarot deck. This is not a number of prints out of the artist's portfolio. So does it work as a deck as well as it works for me as a number of photos? Is it, in a few words, is it still a 5 out of 5? And so I started working with this deck. I used it in a number of members only readings, and it works like a charm. It reads really well. It's very direct. It also gives me, sometimes it throws me away from the original meaning or the original way in which I read a certain card, because it invites me to consider a different perspective, which is something that I always appreciate. And when I pair it up with, for example, another photographic deck, which is the Wayfarer, and let me just show you. So the Wayfarer originally, I believe it's a writer's prompt kind of cards. It's not necessarily an oracle deck, even though in the description of the deck, it does say that you can use it that way. It's also mass market. So this is published by Parcel Locker Press, so you may find this one. It is very affordable, but I have to say it only comes with, I believe, 16 cards in total. So it's obviously way less than what I would have liked, which is really a pity, because I would have loved to have at least 40 cards, with this type of artwork in order to be able to work with tarot decks. I have to say something though. There is an oracle deck. It's called Elizabeth on Earth that reminds me a lot of this one. So I may actually reach by the Elizabeth on Earth and perhaps mix in, shuffle in these cards with the Elizabeth on Earth. This one looks like it's taking out one of the cards from Elizabeth on Earth. So I think that these 2 oracle decks will work really well together. I'm not entirely sure, but I have a good idea. And then by working with these 2 together, I really got into the heat of the deck. I completely understood how it works, even as a tarot deck. So I probably took a step away or a step back from my appreciation of this deck as a photography, a number of photos, let's say, and I started appreciating and understanding it more, and as a consequence of that, also using it more as a divination tool. This is a divination tool. It's a tarot deck. That's what it does. Really, look at this, hearts call to hearts between the 8 of Swords and the 3 of Swords. It could not be more deep. I have to say that more often than not, I find myself reaching for a shadow work type of practice whenever I use these 2 together, which is absolutely fine because I need those decks as well. I know that this is kind of pigeonholing this deck, but it is just the way in which I combine these 2 together. It's also true that the Compass Mentis is really beautiful and it works really well with other oracle decks as well, such as, for example, When Olga Speaks by Sasha Lopez. Those 2 together are absolutely the bomb. I really love them, and they're not conducive to just a shadow work type of practice. They're actually really good together, also in a very balanced way. So I highly recommend these 2. I believe, so this is the Compass Mentis, if I can speak, is the reward of a Kickstarter campaign from, I don't know, 6 to 8 months ago or something like that. So, but I believe that it's actually available for you to purchase it. So you can look it up And if you missed out on the Kickstarter, however, please keep in mind it is an indie deck, so it's not a mass market deck kind of pricing. You will see the pricing is as expected to be, on the higher side because of being it an indie deck. And journey begins between the hermit and the devil. I really wonder what kind of journey that is going to be. Certainly a journey of introspection, because the hermit does go on a journey, but it really depends on why the hermit is going on a journey. Is it because he wants to run away from the devil, from the shame that the devil represents? So it is, as you can see, absolutely amazing. Be bold, but not too bold. With the King of Cups and the Ace of Wands, absolutely. I do see that sometimes a king can also, when it's a king reverse, it can be an arrogant person. So be bold, but not too bold. Bring back the sense of the spark and the fire. That sometimes, takes a step away on knowing our value, knowing our power, and it brings us back to being children with the same type of enthusiasm that we have. And the road is long with the Hierophant and Temperance card. Really, really beautiful as well. Temperance is always talking about the time and the passing of time. And so understanding that we still have a lot to go. On the one hand, is beautiful because it tells us that we can encounter so many more adventures in front of us. But at the same time, it's a bit tiring. So we just need to keep our faith on our mentors. They have done this before. They have been down this road before we did, and they are just teaching us the best way to go through. Absolutely in love with these two. Wow. The wow factor for the Compass Mentis is just exalted by using it with not just this oracle deck, but honestly, as I said, any kind of photographic-based oracle deck that you got, including collage decks. I think that these two, the Compass Mentis with such a deck would go really, really well together. And that was the last deck that I wanted to show you today. For me, all that is important in this video is to show you that sometimes I may have first impression of a deck that are going one way or the other, but I don't necessarily stick to my first impressions. I actually do change my mind every now and then. And so these are the decks I have changed my mind on, whether it was because I now appreciate them, whether at the beginning I didn't, or because perhaps, they still stayed within my higher ratings, but I actually really confirmed that by starting actually to use them. So let me know in the comments below if you have a few examples of decks like this that are wow decks for you, but or maybe they were not so good for you, but then you started working with them and you appreciated them more. I'm always on the lookout for new decks. Thank you so much for watching, and for now, have a great day.